What's up, Magic fans, and welcome to episode 28 of Penny for Your Thoughts. My name's Mikey. As usual, I'm joined by the gruesome twosome. I stole that line from you from the other week, Paul.
I'm going to say that's my line.
Yeah, I know, but got to find something original for next week. You guys all right? How's the Achilles, Paul? Paul's been walking for charity for the last, 40 days?
Yes. Yeah. Last one was today. Finished with a 8-mile walk, and the Achilles is good. It's held up, so happy with that.
Good lad. Geraint, have you cheered up?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. I'm happy with the trade now, and excited to have our guest on tonight, a famous Magic fan.
As Zach Lowe said on his podcast, one of only about 3, and one of about 85 Magic fans in the world, which we all find funny.
We got 4 in the same room now.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're delighted to be joined by Kevin Clark, who's a writer for The Ringer, covers the NFL, a big Magic fan. I think you were born in Orlando, Kevin?
Yeah, born and raised, and, absolutely.
So you're glutton for punishment, just like the 3 of us, being a Magic fan.
It was the good times for like the first, 13 years, 12 years, something like that. It was only later in life that it became the what it is now. So you have to take the good with the bad. This is the tax I'm paying for the Penny and Shaq and Dwight years.
Love it. Good stuff.
For me then, Mikey, when do I start earning something? Because I'm obviously paying the tax well in advance.
Hey, you're paying the repeaters tax. That's what you're paying at the moment. Hey?
Yes, I started following the team in sort of 2013. So that's the point I came to the NBA. So it's only been rebuilds that I've known, except for the 2018-19 season.
Than that, I mean, at least you get a different rebuild this time, right? Like that's the variety you get. You don't get winning and losing. You just get another version of a rebuild. So that should be exciting for you.
Woohoo! Actually, I'm quite excited for this one. I think it's looking good.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thank you for coming on, Kevin. I know we said before we started recording, you've been smashing out the podcast. You were on Zach Lowe's The Low Post yesterday, which is one of my favorite podcasts. These guys always rib me for that because I'm always telling them to listen to it. You were on the Orlando Magic radio show with Jake Chapman. You're on Bill Simmons' podcast last week, straight after the trade deadline. So you've got some good insight there on what you thought. We're going to ask you a few questions later about the moves the Magic made and stuff like that. But for those who don't follow you or don't know who you are, so for some of our followers, how did you get into becoming a Magic fan? I know you were born in Orlando. And how did you get into covering the NFL for the Ringer?
So start with the Magic part first. I mean, when you grow up, probably not. I probably had a different experience than most people, almost a little bit like English soccer, something like that, where I grew up a mile and a half from the Orlando arena, maybe. And so it all seemed very normal to me. I grew up going to Orlando Magic basketball camp when I was a kid. I was actually at Orlando Magic basketball camp the day we lost Shaq. And I remember kind of the assistant coaches kind of realizing the world had changed. And, I'm however old I was, 6 or 7 years old. I'm just thinking, oh, this is fine. We'll be back. And so it was natural. I first kind of was aware of it even before, obviously well before the Penny and Shaq. I was a toddler when Reggie Theus was the biggest star. If you guys know who that is. They were really bad in the beginning, but there was such a sense of community, and those guys, they were always doing, whether it was Terry Catledge or Greg Kite or Mark Akers or Sam Vincent, all of those guys they were always out in the community. They would always do meet and greet type stuff, because Orlando had never been a pro sports town. It wasn't. It was a college town. And in some ways it still is, where, if you put a Florida Gators or Florida State game in Orlando, football game, that'll be the center of attention. The Magic won't be. But it was even more so in the early 90s. And so, again, it all seems so normal and small. And even when Shaq and Penny came, the thing I always think about is, there was a Super Bowl commercial, which is the height of kind of marketing in America. And it was with Penny Hardaway and Tyra Banks and Little Penny. And it was filmed about 4 blocks from my house. And I remember watching it and thinking, well, this is normal. This is fine. Oh, that's 4 blocks from my house. And now when I look at it now, and not only were we a bad team, but, you just realize how amazing it all was to have Shaq and Penny in your community, And, to have the finals in 1995, and you just think, okay, this was not normal. I got incredibly lucky as a young person. And now I look back on it with more amazement than when I saw it, because it was just, because I was so young, I just didn't know how lucky I was, I guess you could say. As far as NFL goes, football is the dominant sport in Florida. Played in high school, followed it in college, went to University of Miami, went to the Wall Street Journal for a couple of years in New York, started covering football there full time, covered a little bit in Miami as well. And then just kind of progressed from there, got hired by the Ringer in 2016, and just kind of fell in love with the coverage part of it. The Magic, from a team standpoint, from that sort of passion, will always be my number one. But from as far as following the league and all that stuff, I really, really love following football.
Awesome. Yeah, good times. Well, we've got two good games to talk about that happened since our last podcast. So we've got the Lakers and the Clippers games to recap. Two similar games, really, where the Magic got off to a bit of a slow start offensively on both games and really turned the dial up in the second half. The Lakers game, we obviously saw the return of the first game of RJ Hampton, Otto Porter, and Wendell Carter Jr. in a Magic uniform. But like I said, I mean, it was a close game. I actually didn't see half of the third quarter. That's another story, but that's a mess. That's a mess up with my league pass. So we took a 5-point lead, and I didn't see that. And we tied the game up with an Otto Porter 3 at the end of 3. But it was really costly fouls and inefficient shooting, really, that sort of which didn't really help us win that game against the Lakers, and we lost 96-93. Has anybody got any thoughts on the Lakers game and sort of first impressions of the new guys? Paul?
Yeah, mate, I thought, would just say both games for me, full of fight and grit from the team. Really good to see. Lakers, I'm going to say I thought Cliff was a little bit harsh in his press conference after the game. At the end of the day, 3 guys have joined the team. They've had no practice. They've come onto a road trip and they've played. Mistakes were always going to happen. Right. I think it's more a case of they are going to diminish, and it seemed to me they diminished last night as a little bit of familiarity grew up. Dwayne Baker played really well, 26 points.
Yep.
Mate, I'll say as much as you want about Chuma. My God,
we could talk all night about Chuma.
The guy over the last 4 games, just hats off to him. So impressive performances, and it's not just scoring. He's passing the ball. Yeah. He's defending really well. Against the Lakers, he faced Morris, Schroeder, and Kuzma. 3 different guys to defend against, each presenting a different challenge, and he really, really played well in that game against those 3 players on defense. It's easy to get lost amongst his scoring, but his defense is something that we are going to look forward to watching, and it's going to be a big, big factor for us. We're going to be very hard to score on once we get this familiarity between all the players, because I think Wendell Carter Jr. has got a good defense as well.
Yeah. I feel like I'm obsessed with Chuma Okeke, because it feels like every week we have a new guest on, and I feel like every week I'm asking them about Chuma. But I'm going to ask Kevin, because I know you've been talking a lot about Chuma the last few days. But what are you seeing from Chuma at the moment? Because I think he's really starting to look comfortable out on the floor at the moment.
He really does. And I think that if this was his rookie season, or if he was drafted last year, there'd be a lot more awareness of him and hype around him. I think that the fact he's developing the way he is really important. And I think that, one thing I want to avoid, because I just saw this and you guys saw it too over the past 7-8 years, is him trying to fill the gaps in our scoring or trying to be the superstar. Almost like I think Aaron Gordon suffered a little bit because of that, because we had a hole at superstar. He was trying to be that superstar. And so with Chuma now, I want him to play his style of basketball and not try to take too many shots and let it come naturally. Because I think on a team like this, where there's a lot of losing and there's a lack of development because of it and all that stuff, why don't we let Dwayne Bacon and Otto Porter Jr. and those guys, Terrence Ross certainly, let's let them heave up a bunch of shots and have have Chuma play his natural game. I've loved him.
Yeah.
I loved his intelligence in traffic. I love, obviously, his ability to shoot the deep ball. I totally agree with you, Paul. The defense is something that we're not probably talking enough about nationally. I think that we have, and this is something Zach Lowe said in the podcast yesterday, but I think a lot of times when you're in total rebuild situations, you don't have anything. You're just absolutely wiping the slate clean. And I don't think that's the case here. I think between Fultz being healthy, Isaac being healthy, and then Chuma, and then Cole Anthony for depth behind Fultz, I think that is a really, really good building block. And that's why I think this is a more impactful and important rebuild than it was 8 years ago. Yes, Vooch was good, but he was still developing. These guys are further along. I mean, this is not 30-year-old Vooch that we're building around. These are young guys who can play, who have defined roles. So much about the last rebuild didn't make sense. It was just Hennigan acquiring assets and then just seeing what we could do with them. It was a lot of not being able to shoot. I mean, that was kind of the original sin of everything, was just that Hennigan thought that shooting could come later. It never came later. Chuma is the exact right guy to have to start this building process.
I'm gonna skip a few sections because I've actually got a question that follows on from that, really, that I was going to ask you about. So this is almost rebuild 2.0
that
we're going through since Dwight got traded. What do you think? Obviously, we need a lot of luck, but what else do you think we need to go our way? What things do we need to learn from that didn't go right under Rob Hennigan?
Well, I think you saw it. First of all, the shooting is important, and just not taking that for granted, because I think that literally he said when Hennigan was fired, Josh Robinson reported that Rob Hennigan literally thought that shooting can be developed, and maybe it can, and maybe he saw things in Oklahoma City, maybe he saw things over the course of his career where that happened. But I'm not ready to draft more shooting prospects who might develop it, 5 years from now. I don't want to do that. If we can get a guy who can score now, I want to do it. But, I was looking at Corey Kispert from Gonzaga as someone who, if we don't get the lottery luck, just draft a guy who can hit shots. That's all I care about.
Yeah.
And keeping Terrence Ross around is so important for that, because somebody's got to score. I think that a more deliberate, to answer your question, a more deliberate plan, rather than just drafting and seeing how it goes. One of the frustrating things, we had Oladipo playing point guard and handling the ball his first year in Orlando. And it's like, what are we doing developmentally? It's almost like we're not trying to develop specific players at specific roles. We were just trying to get these guys on the team bus and just seeing what would happen. And I don't think Jacques Vaughn or James Borrego or even Frank Vogel were the coaches that were going to, or Scott Skiles certainly, were the coaches who were going to be patient and develop these guys. We traded Tobias Harris for almost no reason because Scott Skiles was upset. Gave him away, literally gave him away. Didn't retain anything from that trade with Brandon Jennings and Ilyasova. And so I think you need a coach who's patient. I think you need a coach who's honest. And if you saw Clifford's comments after the game with Los Angeles, he's going to do that. And so I think that a more thought out rebuild and a more thought out acquisition of the building blocks is what's needed. And I think that they've got that between Weltman and Hammond and Clifford. Yeah.
And I think the other thing with this group that we saw again in last night's game against the Clippers was there's so much fight in this team. There's so much, they seem like they're together already. And they're, do you know what I mean? With all the new players coming in and lots of uncertainty, I suppose, for a lot of them. Like I said, Clifford's going to be a bit of a glue guy coach, really, in terms of that. So last night, if you haven't seen the game, the Magic beat the LA Clippers. They were down early, 12-0. They trailed by as many as 16 in the second quarter, struggling offensively, but a huge turnaround in the second half. We were really active defensively, forcing turnovers, air balls. Wendell Carter Jr. had 3 blocks in there as well. We trailed by 9 with 3.5 minutes to go, and the Magic went on a 21-5 run to stun the Clippers, and we won 103-95. Chuma finished with 18 points. Wendell Carter Jr. with 11 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, and 3 blocks. G, what was your... Well, I want you to be honest on this, because earlier you were not happy because it's chalking up against the win column.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned because we don't want, nobody likes a tank, right? Let's just get that out on, nobody likes the tank. you want the guys to try. You want to see that heart and hustle sort of mentality from the team. But we've got 26 games left. We're not making the playoffs. And whilst it's good that everybody's coming together and they're all fighting for each other, and they are fighting for their NBA lives, essentially, aren't they? Because they want to make the roster next year. But some teams are out tanking us, and we don't want to miss out on a top 3-4 player, do we? So it's one of these situations where you can't win. Because you win, some of the fans are unhappy. You lose, and then the tankers are happy, but there's no guarantees for the lottery. So, like I said, you just can't win. I watched the game and we won. And whilst you're happy we won, you're thinking, oh no, now we're 4 games ahead of Minnesota for that, that worst record. Are they going to win another 4 games this year? Probably maybe 4 or 5, but are we going to lose out? I don't think so. So I don't know. What do you think, Kev?
So I'm in agreement with you. I'm extremely worried about that. I would say, I don't remember what year this was. It was the year we lost, and I think Utah won late in the season, and it was a big thing. I think it was 2014 maybe, and it was, we're climbing up in the lottery. It was April. We were all excited about it. And A, you don't get the lottery luck, and so it doesn't matter. Or B, the prospects just don't end up being who you want it to be. And so when you've gone through the process, and I've gone through it 8 times now, 9 times. I mean, you think about how many times. I mean, going back, Dwight Howard 2004, we won, all that stuff. But for me, when I think about the lottery and these little machinations within it, so we have 16 wins. Minnesota has 11. Houston and Detroit have 13. Cleveland has 17. We don't want to get in that Cleveland-Washington 17 win range. No. So let's take it easy for the next couple of games. But what I will say is, when I think about Chuma, or I think about some of these guys, when Cole Anthony returns to full health and all that stuff, I do think there needs to be some semblance of a culture built. And if you saw the dagger last night, the Carter Williams shot, and you saw the bench and how excited they were, and they were, I mean, it was almost like when someone scores a winner at the World Cup. They were off the bench and they were celebrating in the corner, and they left the bench, and it was like that to me. Is as important as 4 percentage points in the lottery or something like that. It's just giving these guys, there's an old story about Jimmy Johnson, the Dallas Cowboys coach, where when they were terrible, they were 1-15 when he took over. He'd come from the University of Miami. He'd won everything he could at college. He goes to the NFL, and he started to, at the end of practice, simulate game-winning kicks. They were an awful team. He would simulate game-winning kicks. And when they made it, he would make the players celebrate like they just won the Super Bowl. And somebody asked Jimmy Johnson, why are you doing this? He said, because these guys need to learn how to win. They need to learn the feeling of winning, so that when it comes, it feels natural. And I understand the tanking part of it. I want to tank. I would be extremely happy if we got the 3rd or 4th worst record. But I also think that someone like Chuma, the guys on the bench, even Mo Bamba, even though he wasn't on the floor, he was celebrating with the team last night. I do think you have to be very careful not to be too bad and try to lose, because when it comes time to winning, you have to know how to do it.
Yeah, and we've seen already, haven't we, that losing this season becomes a habit that you can lose just as much as you can gain, as we saw in 2018-19. What were you going to say, Paul?
I was going to say, the question still arises for me, that are we better going for a prospect, so as we keep losing and we get a better draft pick? Bear in mind, we're only going to get one position better, because it's the bottom 3 that are all going to have the same lottery odds.
Yeah.
So is it a huge thing that we win a few games? Not really. Or are we better getting a little bit of a few wins here and there, getting a little bit of experience for the players, and then with the cap space and the trade exception that we've got, using that to bring in somebody who is more established, because we will be able to be very aggressive on the offer sheets for the restricted free agents when that period of the rebuild comes. So I'm not sold on the fact that we need to be in that bottom 3 as yet. I'm not sold on it. But then again, I don't watch sports to lose. I'd rather see the team win. I'm sorry. That's just me.
This is where it's harder than the NFL, Kev, isn't it? Because in the NFL, if you finish with the worst record, you've got the number 1 pick in the draft, and you got 7 rounds, so the draft's a little bit more even. Would you say, like the first round? There's not as much of a gap between prospects.
I would say that, but I would say that there's no position like quarterback where everything is centered around it and hoops. Yeah. What I would say is that the equivalent to that is a superstar, anybody, whether that's Giannis, whether that's Kawhi. I mean, we've seen some of these teams who are picking in the mid-first round who are able to hit on these types of guys. That's what you need. Nothing matters except the superstar. So when we're talking about restricted free agency, all that stuff, for me, that comes later. That comes, we got Hito Turkoglu on, I think, the mid-level, whatever it was, 15 years ago. But that worked because we already had Dwight Howard. Eventually, we had Rashard Lewis on a max contract. And that's where everything had to flow through Dwight Howard. All of the decisions that we made that were amazing under Otis Smith and Stan Van Gundy and all that stuff. Again, Rashard, Hito Turkoglu, Michael Petras, who was just a phenomenon off the bench. And I loved him on defense. All those decisions made sense because Dwight Howard was there. And we would have, all of those players who I just adored, we would have been a 5 seed, a 6 seed without Dwight Howard, maybe even a 7 seed. We would not have made the finals, all that stuff. And so we need to figure out how to get the superstar. And that requires a lot of lottery luck. It requires a lot of chances. That's why I think it's so important that we have those top 4 protected picks from the Bulls. Even in 2025, look, if we're still looking for our star in 2025 with the Nuggets pick, that's not good. But at least we have that option, okay, to have more firepower. And, there's an old, not to take it back to the NFL, but, the Eagles owner said a couple of years ago, he said, we want draft capital because we're not so arrogant that we think we can outdraft people. We just want as many chances many at-bats, I guess, to use a baseball analogy, as possible, because it is a lot of luck. It is a guy, I remember guys looking at Andrew Wiggins the year before he came out because we thought we were going to get the first overall pick. And I was looking at his highlights and saying, Andrew Wiggins, we got to get him. That's how the rebuild starts right now. Not only do we not get Andrew Wiggins because we didn't get lottery luck, but Andrew Wiggins was not the franchise-changing superstar. So you just have as many chances as you can. You hope for the best. And I do think that lottery, maximizing the lottery pick to an extent, it should be a priority.
Yeah, and I think Jabari Parker was second.
Jabari Parker was
too. Yeah.
You know what I mean,
this is where I'm not 100% convinced that it's the be all and end all. If we've got the fourth best lottery odds, as I understand it, the top 5 stacked in this draft.
Yep, top 6.
We're going to be picking,
depending on who you ask. Yeah.
So we're going to be getting somebody who has got a good potential. And are we? Do you go for the best player available, or do you go for a particular position or a particular need? That's where again people disagree as to which one you do.
Let me ask you guys. Sorry, go ahead.
That leads us on to one of the questions we've got. So, with so many young players already on the roster, Kev, have you got any concern about who the Magic end up drafting and how these sort of pieces eventually fit together, or is it about acquiring the best, talent now and then just seeing who's the best to stick with?
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to ask you guys. Is with the exception of point guard, I kind of feel like we can add anywhere. And if it's Cade Cunningham, you just take it and figure it out later. I think that the story of modern basketball is guys can fit on the floor no matter their positions. Again, with the exception of probably point guard. Maybe if you have 2 slow centers or whatever, you don't want that. But if they can play and they're fast and they're adaptable, you can throw them on the floor together. So I'm not necessarily worried about that kind of fit as long as it's all thought out and we're all developing them within the context of their role. Sort of what I was saying earlier, but everything needs to be deliberate and stuff like that. I think the key is no matter who we draft, I don't care what position it is, as long as it's 2 through 5. But I do care that they're developed as soon as they get here. And I do think that if we hit on a lottery pick, the one thing I don't want to do, and this happened with the last rebuild, is we would say, okay, well, we got this guy, one more year back in the lottery. Let's go again. I don't want to do that. If we get Cade Cunningham or Jalen Suggs or any of these guys, I want to say, you know what, we're going to be a home court team this year. I want that to be the goal. And I want Isaac and Fultz to get healthy and to build towards that. I don't want The problem with the last rebuild was not the aim initially; it was the aim afterwards, which was we're going to just keep getting these lottery guys. We can let the Bulls tank or whatever and take their picks. Once we get the quote unquote star in Orlando, I want to see real development. I want to see them learning their position, learning how to win, and going from there. So as far as positions go, I don't think there's a guy that would replace Fultz in this scenario. So I think it's a moot point, but I think any position is fine. And Cliff can make that work.
Yeah.
So just on that then, so what are your thoughts on the coaching situation? I mean, Clifford's a very good coach. Yeah. Perhaps he's not seen as a developmental coach. And does he want to, coach a rebuild? So do you see us sticking with him, or do you see us maybe bringing a guy like Jerry Stackhouse, or dare I say it, Penny Hardaway?
Listen, I'd love to see Penny. I worry. This whole thing's a timing thing, right? Is when do you bring in another guy? Stan Van Gundy happened to be the perfect coach in 2007. And thank God we didn't end up with Billy Donovan, because he wouldn't have been nearly as good a coach when Billy Donovan pulled out of that. And I think Clifford is the right guy because, I love that quote he said the other day where he said, we're not going to make stuff up because that's what bad franchises do. We're just going to say if somebody played well or didn't play well. And I think that's a shot indirectly at some of the younger players who we've graded them on a curve instead of grading them as NBA players. And I still think Mo Bamba has a chance at success, but I feel like we still kind of make excuses for him and all that stuff. And I think that at some point we need to just be bluntly honest about who we are. And I think Cliff is good at that. I think you give him probably 2 more years, something like that, and then assess where we are. Would Penny at that point be an elite college coach who want to make the jump? Jerry Stackhouse is an intriguing option. You see in this hiring cycle, even a number of good assistants go to college. Maybe they establish themselves. If we wanted to go that route, we could, or a top assistant, or listen, we get so good that top guys want to come coach us. You just don't know how that's going to shake out. Mm-hmm. So I'm not opposed to Cliff right now, because I just don't know who else would make sense for the next, say, 2 years. I want these guys playing hard, and I want them to play defense like that. Right. There are not a lot of guys who are better than Cliff at teaching defense. Mm-hmm. And I think that if we get some superstars in, I think if Cliff is there, the worst case scenario is these guys learn good defensive habits and they learn how to play hard. And that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. Actually, I thought it was interesting that last night down the stretch that Coach Clifford went with Wendell Carter Jr. as the centre position. I thought it was quite a vote of confidence. It was an interesting decision, and I think it was justified by the final plays he made. He was
without a doubt. The book on Wendell is that he gets bullied around a lot by bigger guys, and that he wasn't as physical as he could be down low. But I think that's the definition of a developmental prospect. And if he was a perfect player, he wouldn't have been available as a throw-in in that trade. Yeah. And so I think that he's a really good, Zach Lowe, who knows worlds more about basketball than I do, he really likes the players we got in this. And I kept trying to talk down the players and saying the picks. And he kept saying, RJ Hampton is really good. Yeah. Wendell Carter can really develop into something. And I think that's probably the overlooked part of this, is that we got a lot of recent lottery picks who really have a chance to develop in the right scenario. And that's why I like the idea of a Wendell Carter, who frankly at this point has shown more as a big than Mo Bamba has in the time he's been in Orlando.
Yeah, talking about Mo Bamba, because you mentioned him just now, Philip Rossman-Reich always says this about Markelle Fultz. I think a lot of us now don't see Markelle Fultz as number one Markelle Fultz. And I think you could say the same about Mo Bamba now. We don't really see him as the number 6 pick in that draft. It's more a case of we want to develop him into being able to stay on the floor. That's an important thing. And again, that's him learning his role and developing and putting all these players in a position and in a way that they can start growing their game. So, yeah, absolutely. One thing I wanted to ask you about was the trade from last week. I know you've sort of broke this down a little bit. Are you happy with the return we got for Vooch, AG, and Evan?
Yeah, and once the more I thought about it, I was probably like you guys, stunned that Vooch leaves because we'd heard so much about Fournier and Gordon, and that Vooch was untouchable unless there was a big offer, and then Vooch goes first, and that was the strange part of it. And I think once you think about it, it makes all the sense in the world that you wouldn't leave Vooch alone with a bunch of 22-year-olds, 19-year-olds, whatever. Yeah. He's never played with as good a shooters as he could, and now you're just going to leave him playing with Dwayne Bacon and a bunch of these guys. It just didn't make any basketball sense. And I understand the idea, and a lot of friends from home say, hey, we need a veteran like Vooch to bring along the young kids. Listen, we had Channing Frye, 7 years ago. We can get one of those guys. Okay. If Vooch is worth 2 first round, 2 essentially lottery picks, top 4 protected, plus a handful of nice young pieces, you just take that and you figure it out. Even Otto Porter Jr. I mean, listen, I'm coming in with a clean slate on these guys, and I kind of like the way he played last night. I don't think he's, a centerpiece of anything, but I think he can score, and I kind of liked it. So I was happy with the return. Once I saw it, I talked myself into it. I generally like this front office. And I think that they're pretty smart dudes. And we saw how patient that they've been. And one thing I didn't know, one thing I was worried about is sometimes you can confuse patience for being smart, right? Like, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, they were just stalling, and it turns out they weren't capable of anything. And what I saw last week is that the patience was actually in service of something good. And that's a big relief to me.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you got 3 people here that all still believe in them.
Yeah, absolutely.
We said it on Saturday, didn't we? When we had Josh Robbins on. There's a bit of an expectation of people on Twitter that think that the Magic front office just sit on their hands every trade deadline or during the off season. I don't think that's true at all. Like you said, no move is better than a bad move at the end of the day. So
right, exactly. Yeah, they could have given Vooch away 2 years ago when he wasn't at his peak, but they knew how he was developing, how the team was developing. I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah. When as part of the Evan trade, we got the trade exception. Yeah. Is that something you would use? And have you any thoughts of how we could use it effectively?
I've thought about that. I haven't seen any good names. This is almost like when we had the taxpayer exception this year, mid-level rather. And it was like, okay, well, we have this, but then we don't, like Jordan Clarkson was the rumor I heard, once we had it. And so I actually haven't seen any names for $17 million. Have you guys seen any names that pop out that would make sense? Because I haven't either. And I sometimes think that some of these mechanisms, they can't be, I think, mid-level again is a pretty good example where just because you have the mechanism doesn't mean you can turn it into something valuable. So I'm happy that we have it. I just haven't heard any names that track with it.
Yeah. There's also been lots of talk this week with Drummond going to the Lakers and the Nets getting Griffin and Aldridge through the buyout market about how it's helping the rich get richer and is skewed against small market teams. What's your thoughts on that, Kev?
I think that, first of all, a lot of these big names are bigger names than players at this point. And, I remember the Miami Heat, we used to get these buyout guys when they had LeBron and Wade and Bosh. And then you'd see them play in, April or the second game of the playoffs, or whatever, and say, wow, these guys are done. These guys cannot play. And so I'm not talking about Drummond in general. I'm just saying a lot of these buyout guys are bought out for a reason. Some of these guys get bought out early and why that happens, put that aside. But I tend to think if you guys were already rich beyond all imagination and, were cut loose from a team that had, just won 15 games or whatever, I think going to play in Los Angeles for not a lot of money seems like a good thing. And going, playing in Brooklyn with 3 superstars seems like a good thing. So I understand kind of the rich get richer mentality, but I also understand if you're a free agent, you've already made a ton of money and you've been bought out and you're basically being paid to go play for somebody else, you would maximize your opportunity to win a ring and have fun. So I don't think, the problem with the whole, like, oh, it hurts small market teams thing, I mean, I guess you could make the argument that somebody like a Milwaukee is hurt in that scenario, or even a Denver is hurt in that scenario. But I also think that I think that it doesn't really matter all that much. I mean, there was a couple stories last week written about how rarely that these things matter. But then I also think that, you know, a middling team isn't even in the market for a player like that. So you're really looking at only a handful of teams even competing for them. And I just don't think it's a big enough problem to where the league would need to step in or anything like that. The system is kind of fine as it is.
Yeah. I saw the criticism, and I've got to be honest, I couldn't see how that was an issue to somebody like us, because I just didn't see it personally.
Yeah, it's definitely not an issue for us. We don't want anybody like that right now. We want the kids to play and all that stuff. So I'm not too worried about it. Lakers can have Drummond.
Yeah, I suppose the other point in relation to the buyout market is teams like Detroit losing Griffin now. They do save some money, so that's not everything, but they gain a roster spot, which is probably the most important thing. Giving them a chance to sign somebody, be it a 10-day contract, be it someone from the G League, and you don't know who you're going to hit. You just look at maybe Oklahoma City last year. They had Lou Dort as their two-way player, and you look at him now, and he's really sort of made a name for himself and established himself in the league. So whilst I don't like the buyout market, there are benefits to sort of cutting loose the big earners.
Yeah, and I don't think. Listen, I don't think Detroit wanted Blake around anymore. I mean, like, just from a goal, you look, what is every team's goal? And I don't think that the Detroit, who obviously is just stuck in the ugly middle, and is playing the same lottery game as we are, needed a Blake Griffin around. So I think those kind of buyouts kind of serve every party, I guess.
Yeah. Or has been Blake Griffin, as I called him the other day.
He's dunking again. At least he's dunking again.
Well, yeah, but how many attempts has he had, though? Because he had one on his debut, and he literally scored 2 points, if I remember rightly. That was his only bucket of the game. I find this funny, but there we go. We have a bit of banter with our Brooklyn Nets UK account, don't we? So there was.
I mean the Brooklyn bandwagon UK.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Did they used to be New Jersey fans, or did they pick it up when they moved to Brooklyn a couple of years ago?
They don't know where New Jersey is.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So our next episode, we are recording on Monday. We got one of our UK followers, Alan Kane, coming on with us. So we've got 3 games before then. So we got the Pelicans, Jazz, and Nuggets. So we're rounding off this 5-game West Coast road trip. Last week, Garrett got his weekly prediction half right. He said 1-1, but he actually said we beat the Lakers.
I'd have rather beat the Lakers, but
we would all rather beat the Lakers.
We were going to say that's a foregone conclusion, dude.
So we play the Pelicans on Thursday, which is a 1 a.m. tip-off over here. Jazz on Saturday at 2, and the Nuggets on Sunday at 3. Guys, predictions this week. Go on, Kev. Are we gonna keep this? Because we've looked really, what's the word I'm looking for? Really competitive the last 3 games since we made the trade. The Portland game was a close game until CJ McCollum started got himself going in the last few minutes, and obviously the Lakers and the Clippers.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm also more intrigued by it because we're playing a different style of basketball because Vooch isn't there. So much flowed through Vooch the last 8 years. That just even seeing what it all looks like has been fascinating to me. And the fact that we're competitive makes it doubly so. I know G is sort of anxious that we're going to win some of these games, but I will say I do think we after the letdown. I've seen this Magic team. Not that it's 1-1, but I've seen this Magic team have some letdowns in the past. They can only be so good for a stretch of time. I unfortunately think we go over 2.
We got 3 games, so you're going over 3.
Oh, sorry. Geez. All right, so
Pelicans, Jazz, and Nuggets.
Yeah, no. I see the schedule. All right. I think we beat the Nuggets.
Ooh.
I think there's an Aaron Gordon revenge game. He didn't shower himself in glory as far as the comments on the way out, unlike Vooch, who obviously was so committed to the community and will be remembered fondly in Orlando. I think we give it our all, and we beat Denver.
Did you see his post-game comments after the second game? I don't know if you saw that at all.
I don't think so, no.
It come across better, but it seemed like the Nuggets PR staff had a little word in his ear.
Yeah.
I think you need to say something nice about Orlando on the next time you're asked that question.
Oh,
but
man. Yeah, I just didn't like it. It just rubbed me the wrong way, but that's fine.
That's cool. Geraint?
Yeah. I think we're going to get a blowout loss in the next couple of games, just to bring us down to earth a little bit. I can see us going 0-3 now for the remainder of this road trip.
Paul?
I'm saying that we beat the Pelicans in the Wezawundu rematch, because he's now at the Pelicans, isn't he? We've won the last 4 games that we've played against them. We've won 4 of the last 5 visits to New Orleans. I think we take that. Jazz and Nuggets are on a back-to-back, both at altitude. We haven't won in Utah since 2015, and we've only won 1 of the last 11 visits to Denver. So 1 and 2 for me. But I would love us to beat the Denver Nuggets.
You got to believe. I think it can happen.
I would love us to do that.
We have enough. I know this is a weird thing to say. We have enough NBA level players. This is not a barren wasteland. We have enough NBA players where we can get hot for an evening, and beat almost anybody in the regular season when it's not, maximum intensity.
I will say this. We've won 3 out of our last 10 games, but so has Washington, Cleveland, Detroit, and Minnesota. Houston have only won 2 out of the last 10. So, feeling a little bit down because we won last night.
I'm just a bit nervous. Lottery night's going to be awful.
Because the other teams are all in the same boat. So I'm going to say 2. So I'm going to go 1 and 2. I'm going to say we beat the Nuggets as well, but I feel like the way we've been playing is going to keep us in games. And then it just depends whether Dwayne Bacon goes off on one and we don't see him pass the ball for a second half, and Dwayne Bacon throwing up what he can in 48 minutes. So I'm going 1 and 2. Guys, got anything else you want to add?
Only that I'm surprised that G's become a professional tanker.
I know. He's probably the one that didn't want it the most.
He'll be changing his name to Tank for whatever.
It reminds me, I used to be like that in like 2014, 2015. As I said, lottery night to me was the most stressful night of the year. And I would just sit there and we would always lose the lottery, or we'd always get the pick that we were slotted for. We'd never climb up, and it was just agony. And after a couple of years, I realized, again, it's a total crapshoot. You don't know. I mean, I remember we wanted Dante Exum so badly one year because we needed a point guard, all that stuff. Now I just let it flow. Whatever happens in the lottery happens, and we just hope for the best.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The issue is Mikey runs a tankathon every day, and the last couple of days haven't been great. And when we're picking 7, you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
So
after the trade deadline,
draft.
After the trade deadline, I was like, let's just do it for the followers. Let's just do a daily tankathon and just let them see how random it really can be. And again, it's all luck in one night, isn't it? That's all it takes.
Yeah.
But I think we've gone as high as 2, as low as 6 with our own pick. The Bulls pick, well, we don't know. We'll have to see how they play out the rest of the way. But cool. So, guys, if you're not following us, make sure you're following Orlando Magic UK on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and our YouTube channel where we post the podcast. Make sure you visit our website, orlandomagic.uk.com. Paul's still putting up all his game previews, doing a few game reviews when we can.
Yeah, I've got to catch up. To be honest, I've got to catch up on them, haven't I?
It's cool. All our enthusiasm is just getting sucked out of us a little bit. But there's the magic moments on there, which G's putting up you're updating that every couple of weeks. So we've got that on there for everybody on game days. Kev, thanks for giving us your time. I know you've been super busy this week.
This is a blast.
Yeah, so hopefully we can have you on again soon. Well, maybe we'll have you on after the lottery's done.
Oh my God. I hope G's okay after that.
We should have a penny for your thoughts lottery night special.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Maybe we should live stream it.
Yeah.
No.
No?
I will tell you what. I'll come on after lottery. You don't want to see me on lottery night. I will lock myself in a room and just not let anybody in. It's still, even though I've tried to be zen about it. Maybe I won't even watch it this year. I'll just try to get the results the next day.
Man, good stuff. Cool. Well, thank you again for coming on.
Thanks,
and we'll see you guys on Monday.
Anytime, guys. All right.
Nice
Thanks
one.
for having me.
Cheers. Go Magic.
Thank you. Go Magic.